Hey guys, welcome back to AFK Journey. In today's video, we're going to be going through the best beginner teams, or my opinions on the best beginner teams for early game. Now, I'll touch on some things and how they evolve later game with some characters getting better later on and stuff like that. But I really want to focus on the early game and structuring your teams for the start of the game. So, in general, let's start with the absolute basics. In most teams, now there will be niche situations that go different to this, but in most teams, you're going to want at least a tank, a DPS, and a healer. Now, which ones they are, it doesn't matter, but that is going to be the general play. You want at least one tank, DPS, and healer. That's just pretty safe all around. Now, your other two units can be supportive units, another DPS, another tank in some situations, another healer in some situations. Basically, your remaining two slots are flex, and it really does depend on enemy teams. Some teams you fight, double tank is going to really help you out. Other teams, running double healer and one tank is perfectly fine. Some teams, you'll run like in the early game, you'll run like a Rowan and a Leica, and then another DPS, and you'll just try and outpace the enemy team. So there are different things, but in general, a tank, a healer, and a DPS is your core. Now, we want to keep in mind that we do have faction bonuses. So having three of a faction or anything like that is going to give us a faction bonus. So as you can see here, we get 10% attack, 10% HP for having three of the same faction, and that goes up over time. And in general, I think you want to try and get at least a 3 faction bonus, meaning you have 3 of one faction. And so let's go through my first team that I think is just a fantastic beginner team. And that is going to be the Graveborn core. Now with this Graveborn core, you got Thorin, who in my opinion is the best early game tank, and you got Cecilia, who is I want to say the safest early game DPS, because you get a guaranteed copy of her. You can get dupes from the store. She's just like a free-to-play's best friend. She also has control. She has a pseudo tank in Mr. Kyla that she summons with her ultimate. She's just a fantastic early game progression unit, and you get a free copy of her with your first 10 pulls. So a lot of people are going to have her, going to use her. So those are the first 2 in there. Now, when you get healer, your healer is either going to be Smokey or Rowan, or Huon, which most people will have one of them, but I often do use this in a double healer team with, like, say, Smokey and Rowan, but it doesn't matter. That leaves one slot. So you're going to have a healer. Sometimes you'll just run the one healer and maybe run a tank, like a secondary tank. Now, something like Brutus, something like Antandra, who we do get a lot of dupes for free through missions and stuff like that, is also going to be perfectly fine. But for that third Graveborn, I've been using a Viperian. Now, you can get away with any Graveborn in general for this last spot. I like Viperian. He does deny enemies some energy, and he allows you, instead of like boosting your team's energy, he denies the other team a bit of energy, which helps you have basically the energy advantage in the battle. So I like that as a core. So you basically run the Thorin, Cecilia, Viperian, and then you can slap in a healer, 2 healers, a healer and a support, a healer and a tank, and that's pretty much going to be the way it goes. But like I said, most of the time with this one, the balance play that I do is going to be with those 2 there, and away you go. Otherwise, sometimes I will run it in a 3-2 faction bonus, which would be something like this, where we go ahead and we get the 3 and 2, which gives us a 14% bonus because we also have 2 maulers in the team. But something like that is going to be perfectly fine. And like I said, I really do like the Graveborn core team. Now, the other main core that you can run is going to be the Mauler one. So I want to talk about Maulers in early game, whereas when we look to the Wilders and the Lightbearers, I will touch on them, but they're more later where they start to shine, because some of those characters really want their exclusive equipment and stuff like that, so they want higher ascension. So when we look at Maulers, you could run something like this, and then we have Odie. Odie's a fantastic character throughout the game, gets even better when he gets his exclusive equipment, but he's a fantastic DPS for campaign, for PvP, for bossing especially as well, so he's a fantastic unit. Now, Smokey, fantastic healer. Then you can run Antandra, because like I said, she's a tank who I won't put on the wish list personally, but you do get a bunch of mission copies of her to get her decently ascended in the early game, so she is a good option. Otherwise, you do have Brutus as your other option for the tank, and that gives you your core 3-piece bonus. Now, beyond that, you're pretty much flexible to go with whatever you want. If you're using Cecilia as your main DPS, slap her in there. Then, you know, you can slap a Rowan in for a secondary healer. If you want a secondary tank, you can slap in him. You can really just play around whatever you want with this, because you do have the tank, the the healer and the DPS in this team. So whatever you put in, you can just fill any one of those roles, depending on the enemy team, and you're pretty much safe to go from there. Whereas when we look at the Graveborn team, you're sort of filling the 2 DPS roles with Cecilia and Viperian or whoever else you choose. So you kind of have to slot in a healer. But this one is very flexible on what else you want to put in there. But like I said, having the tank between Brutus and Antandra, the Smokey, and then the Odie is a pretty safe play. Just keep in mind, Odie isn't going to be as strong as Cecilia in the super early game, in my opinion. Once he starts getting dupes, then he will start to run away for sure and become a lot better. So that is what we're looking at for the Mauler core team. Then as we jump on into the Lightbearers team. So the Lightbearers team would be, we have Vala as your DPS. Then we're going to have Rowan as a healer. Now this is a pretty good start. The problem with this is that, and like this is a good like sort of play around that you can do in the Mauler team. You could slap these two in that Mauler team, but the problem with these two is then we have to put another Lightbearer. Now early game you could run this with Lucius perfectly fine. Lucius is okay in like the first 3 to 5 days of play. He falls off very quick after that, so keep that in mind. So Lucius, not the greatest. Moving on past that, I think the other option is going to be the main option for this core team would be having a Corrin in there. Now, Corrin gets really good once he hits Mythic. Before then, he's okay. He has some shielding. He has some support, but I feel like he really excels once he gets his exclusive equipment. So like I said, I feel like this team needs more investment to get to be a solid core, but it's not too bad. And then from this team, it leaves you with a tank, a tanking spot, and then you're probably going to run a DPS spot with something like, you know, your Cecilia again or something like that. And that's kind of going to be what your team looks like. Something like this along those lines. But like I said, Corrin, even though he's okay early, he just really shines later on. He's also a great unit to get dupes of anyway, because once you look to bossing, he's going to be fantastic there as well. So he is just an all-round good unit, but just takes a bit more to get running. And like I said, I don't like the Lightbearer core as much as the Graveborn core. However, all the Lightbearers need is to get like a really good, like, top tier, like competes with Thor and tank, and then this becomes a really good early game core to go ahead and run. Then the final one we have is the Wilders. If you have Granny's a great tank. Then we've got Huon, who is a good healer. The problem with Huon is that I do like running her with another healer, and this is where the Wilder team gets kind of bogged down, because I don't think there's any DPS option in the early game. Iron gets amazing later on. This team with an exclusive equipment, Iron can be fantastic, especially if she's got her exclusive equipment as well, and then you run a Damien with his exclusive equipment. Like, you can make some pretty good teams with that stuff, but that is later game. The problem is here, we've got a tank, a healer, but like I said, in the early game, Huon, I find, wants to be paired with another healer because things will often die before she can get her first heal off. However, if you do run this team with like a Brutus, that might be able to buy you a time to save your Granny, to let Granny survive until Huon's ult, and then you can be sort of safe for that, and then it leaves you the option to put 2 DPS in. But like I said, this is where Wilders become tricky. Leica's good in the early game, but she kind of falls off later in my opinion, and if you're running this, you're running 2 tanks, a healer, and a support. That only leaves you with 1 DPS in your team, and it feels like you're not getting enough offensive pressure in this team, and that is my problem with the Wilders as running the Wilders core. But definitely later game, when you start getting more dupes of Iron and stuff, the Wilders have a lot more play. But like I said, in general, you want to be running a tank, a healer, and a DPS at minimum, and then you can fill in your final 2 slots depending on you know, what the other team is doing. Sometimes, like I said, you want to run double tanks, sometimes you can run double healers, sometimes you want to go full offensive, run like a Rowan, a Leica, a tank, and 2 DPS, and just try and out pressure them. There's many different options that you can do, but I do think that having the three Graveborn core is a great one, and also having the 3 Maulers is another great core, and then the Lightbearers and the Wilders sort of pick up later on, not in like sort of your first week of play. So that is going to be my summary of teams in the early game. If you guys do have any other ideas, let me know. Now, there is more niche things about placement and stuff like that. I'll make more detailed videos going through placements, different team formation arrangements and stuff that can work in different situations, but that will be in a future video. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.